Welcome back to part 2 of the Myriad Schedule training course. In the previous video we looked at the fundamentals of scheduling along with how to set up the categories and attributes you need to use for your system. We also looked at how to add songs, links and adverts to the system, as well as how to perform some maintenance via the media report and mass changer. Finally, we looked at how to view the history for an item, an artist or a category. In this video, we'll be concentrating on how to build and edit clocks, how to assign them to hours of the week, how to add station rules, and how to schedule content for your station. So let's get started. Before we start building our first clock, let's just remind ourselves of exactly what we mean by a clock. A clock is a plan for a 1 hour segment of programming that Myriad will generate. So whilst your radio shows may be 3 or 4 hours long, they'll be made up of 3 or 4 1 hour clocks. Within the clock is a framework that Myriad Schedule can use to fill in with actual content. So an example of a clock could be an advert followed by a song, followed by a couple of more songs, then a link or a jingle, then another advert, and then another jingle, and then 2 more songs, and so on until you've got enough content to fill your entire hour. Of course, it's a bit more complex than that, because each one of those items you could then specify exactly which category it should use, which tags it should use, and if you've got Myriad Schedule Plus, you could also add in types, genders and eras. There's also some rules in play to stop songs from repeating, to stop artists coming around too often, and lots of other things that you can set in the rule sets. But essentially, think of a clock as a list of things that should be played in a 1 hour show. These clocks are then assigned to hours of the week on the clock assignment grid, but we'll get to that later. In the clocks and rules section, the first option you'll see is the edit clock section. This is used for adding new clocks, editing existing clocks, and assigning clocks to specific hours of the week. So let's take a look. Click on the Edit Clocks button and it will open the Edit Clocks window. On the left hand side is a list of all the clocks you have on your system. The right hand side is the clock assignment grid, and it shows you which clock will be used for any hour of the week. But we'll come back to that in a little while. Myriad Schedule actually offers 2 different types of clock. We have a simple clock and an advanced clock. Let's take a look to explain the differences. Here we have a simple clock. A simple clock is really just a very rough outline for what Myriad Schedule should use for picking the content. We can see we have a clock name, we have the type set to simple, we have the playout mode set to auto fade or live assist, and we have the station rules that we want to use. We'll come on to station rules in a short while because they play a very important part. But in this particular case, I've set this simple clock to override the station rules and actually use the goals that are down here. And this is really only just to make it very simple to explain to you. So we can see which set of station rules we're using, but we're actually overriding some of the category goals and some of the key category rules within the clock. We can also specify a media item that should be played at the beginning of this simple clock and also at the end of this simple clock. Just type the media ID number into here or here if you want to include them. Simple clocks also allow you to add an auto hook to the beginning of the hour. So if you did that, you'd go into auto hook, click edit, and then you can choose to set the jingle or the link that plays at the beginning of the auto hook, the one that plays in the middle and between each hook, a media item to play at the end of each hook, how many songs to play the hooks from, how many hours ahead to look, and the pattern to use, whether it's next X, random X, or next X in reverse. You can also specify a media item that will be played if no items in the hour actually have hooks set. We've talked about auto hooks elsewhere in this training course, so we won't dwell on that too much in this at this time. Finally, we have a duration that we have the duration for the overall thing. So usually this will be set to an hour, but if you want to set a simple clock that is actually generating half an hour of content, you can do that. And I missed one out here, which is the automatically choose a link every X songs. This is important because we don't add any structure to simple clocks. We have to tell it how often it should play a link. And in this case, we're going to get it to play a link every 2 songs. Because we've overridden the station rules, this has enabled the song category goals and the link category goals section. This section allows you to set the goals that Myriad Schedule will use whenever this simple clock is in play. And as you can see, we've got a list of the song categories that we have, and we have the amount of songs in each category and the average length for this category. And then we have a weightings bar here, which allows us to choose how the amount of songs relative to the other songs in the hour. So you can see this pie chart on the right hand side shows you the relative weighting. And currently we have pop music set to songs from the pop category set to just over half or just under half of all of other songs. So let's say we wanted to increase the amount of dance music in this hour. We can simply take that and slide it up, and you can see the proportion of the different categories is changing. Finally, on this screen, we have a rule override, which allows us to override the rules for this particular clock. Now, we're going to be covering rules in more detail later, but let's have a quick look at this, since as we're in the simple clock right now. So click on the rules override button, and that brings up a rules. You can see by default it's used the category rules from the configuration in the station rule set. So by default it will use the rules in the station rule set, which in this case is the main station rules, because I just selected that a minute ago. But let's say for this particular category I wanted to override, so let's just cancel. So if I was doing this on the pop category, it would make sense. So whenever a pop song is scheduled using this simple clock, override the main station rules and change the title separation to be, say, 3 hours. And we can also specify whether this rule can be broken, if it's a breakable rule, or if we do not want the system to break that rule, we can untick that and then the system will not be able to break that rule. We also see we've got a link category goals tab. Obviously we aren't telling it where to play the links, we're just telling it to play links every X songs. But we also need to tell it which categories to use. And again, because we've overridden the station rule set, we have to set the weightings in here. So we may well say, actually, we don't want promos at all. We just want it to be an equal station IDs and sweepers. But because we've only got 3 sweepers and 13 station IDs, that will result in our sweepers getting repeated a lot. So normally in this type of scenario, you'd probably have it set something more like that. So you've got mostly station IDs and some sweepers. That's a very important thing to note as well, is that if you select some categories, like say I've got my indie category here, I have no indie songs on the system. If I was to select a reasonable amount of indie category songs, whenever it tries to schedule an indie category song, it will fail because there are no indie songs. So you really shouldn't set your category goals to have any songs that you don't actually have content in. Similarly, categories with very small amounts of content, like say this jazz, there'd be no point me saying let's play a large proportion of jazz in this hour, because we only have 5 jazz songs, so it will run out of songs very, very quickly. Just going back to the rules, you see that we changed the rules for the pop. That's why that's in green now. It's warning you that there's an override in play for that particular category inside of this clock. And that's a simple clock, very easy and very useful for just adding content, but doesn't give you much control over the actual structure of the show. For that, you're going to need an advanced clock. So let's take a look at one of those. Okay, we've got an advanced clock here. Please excuse the grammar. I had to put a advanced clock instead of an advanced clock just to get it at the top of the list. Okay, so in an advanced clock, you can see you've got your clock name, And this time we've got advanced clock selected instead of simple clock. You can actually convert an advanced clock to a simple clock or a simple clock to an advanced clock by simply clicking on the opposite button, and it will do the conversion for you. Again, we've set the playout mode to be auto fade or live assist, and we're choosing a set of goals or a station rule set here. So currently I'm going to leave this one as using the default station rules. As it happens, we only actually have one set of station rules currently set up on our system, but later on when we create some more sets of station rules, you can either pick a specific item, or you can just say use the default, in which case it will always use the default. But again, just like in the simple clock, I've chosen to override these category goals. Let me show you why I've done that. So if we look at the song category goals, we can see that we've got just like exactly the same as we had with our simple clock. So we've got the list of categories, the number of songs in each category, the average length, any rule overrides we're doing for this particular clock, and also the relative weighting of content in there. Now, if I wasn't overriding this, let's turn this back off. So instead it would actually be using the same settings, but within the main station rule set. So as you can see, inside the main station rule set, I've got a fairly even spread of content around the categories. So that would give me just pretty much random music. Now, obviously, that isn't what we want, and later on we'll change that. But the reason that we might use this instead of the override is if we use the station rules and then adjust these settings in the station rules instead, if we want to make a change that applies to lots of clocks, then if they're just using the station rule set, if we make a change to that station rule set, it will apply to all clocks that use that rule set. Whereas if we want to create a clock where it is unique, then we would normally override it and just set the song category goals and the link category goals to be whatever we want to just for that clock. Now, the key thing about an advanced clock is actually in the clock items list. Here you can see we have a clock items list here, which is all of the items that we're going to use in this clock. So we're going to start with a link, and in this case it's coming from the station ID category. And if I scroll along here, you can see we can also set the type, the genders, and the eras, although you can only set type, gender, and era if you have Myriad Schedule Plus. There's also a must-have tag, which is available in both standard and plus, and also a must not have tags column, which is only available in Schedule Plus. So in Myriad Standard, you'd have category and must have tag. And then finally, we've got hardware, ending, droppable, fadeable, lock, the chain type, which allows you in live shows to change from red to green, and also a remove button. So as you can see, in this advanced clock, we're playing a link from the station ID, then a song from the A list, and I haven't specified any of the other content yet, but obviously we would go through and do that. And we're going to build a clock in a few seconds anyway, so you'll see how that happens. And we got an advert break, and then we just carry on with songs and links. But we have other content down the left-hand side here, so we could say, okay, well, let's add a general category advert break here as well, and let's add a social post into there, and let's add an absolute time into here. We'll go through what all these things mean later on, but essentially this allows you to build up a framework for your show that will be used whenever Myriad Schedule uses this clock to fill an hour. So let's build a clock from scratch. Okay, let's build a new clock, and start off with build a very simple clock. So just click on Add New Clock, opens the new clock window. We give it a name, so let's call this one Overnights. And this time around, we're going to build a simple clock. So we'll leave it in simple clock mode. Choose which player mode we want, either live assist for any live shows or auto fade for any automated shows. This is an overnight show, so we want auto fade. Then we can choose whether or not we want to use the main station rule set or the default station rule set. And if we had more station rule sets defined, then they would all be listed here and we could choose one of them. As we haven't done rules yet, we only have the main station rule set. So I'm going to leave this on user defaults, but I'm going to override the category goals so that we can set them now rather than later. Now, what would normally happen with an overnights would be that you would have maybe several different overnights and would have them using a station rule set, because that way, if you needed to change the balance of music, you could do so in a station rule set rather than editing each individual clock. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to use the override feature so that we can actually set the clock, the category goals ourselves. Next off, we're going to choose whether or not we want to have a piece of a media item to play at the beginning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say yes to that. And I'm going to type in media item number 2. And I need to make sure that whatever's at media ID number 2 on the media wall is the jingle or the link or the whatever it is I want to play at the beginning of this simple clock. I'm not going to put an auto hook in this particular one. And I'm going to tell it to play a jingle every 3 songs, because overnight we just want to more concentrate on music rather than playing jingles. And then finally, we've got the song category and link category goals. So in here, I'm going to set the balance of music that I want to use in this simple clock. Now, one good tip is, obviously, when you've got lots of different categories, it could take some time to do this. And if we only have a few categories we want to use, it's often easier to use the 0 or weightings button, which will take them all down to 0, and then just pull up the slider for the ones you want to add. So let's add some pop, and we'll add a handful of A-list songs, and we will add in a little bit of rock, a little bit of gold, but we'll leave the dance out of this because we don't really want to play dance music overnight. So take a look at the pie chart here. Is it the way we want it to be? If it looks right, then that's fine. We also need to take into account a little bit the amount of songs we've got. So we've got more pop songs than anything else. So it's only right then that we would have them as the highest proportion. I'm going to just do the same thing on the links, but this time around I'm just going to tell it to play only a small amount of sweepers and the rest will be station IDs. Now, if I wanted it to be all station IDs, I could, of course, set them all to 0 and put that to 100. Obviously, it won't display the pie chart because the pie chart is useless if you haven't got more than one thing. But now, in this particular case, when you've got more that set to 100, it'll play all station IDs. But that's okay. I do want to add in a few sweepers here and there. So let's get that to where I want it to be, around about there. And that is it for a simple clock. Click OK. And our overnight clock has been added to our list of clocks. But what about if we wanted to create something a bit more complex? Well, for that, we're going to need to take a look at an advanced clock. To build this example of an advanced clock, let's imagine we're creating a clock that we want to use on our breakfast show. So this will be a live clock rather than an automated clock. Once again, click on Add New Clock to start the new clock building process. Here you can see all new clocks start off life as simple clocks. Let's give it a title. And we want to choose advanced clock. Now, when I click on this, it's actually going to ask me if I want to use the settings I have here as the basis for an advanced clock. So what that will do is actually autofill with an hour's worth of empty music with a jingle every second item. Now, I want to build this clock from scratch, so I'm going to say no, but normally you'd probably say yes, because that will save you a lot of work in building your clock. Okay, so here we have the empty clock. We've already given it a clock name. We've chosen advance. As we said, we want this to be a live one, so we want to change the playout mode or the schedule log mode to be live assist. And let's leave it on the station default rules for now, because we're going to actually mostly define what we want within the clock. So if we click on the station, the song category goals or the link category goals tab, you do get a pie chart of the breakdown of categories that is based on the settings within the station rules that are selected, or in this case, the default station rules, which obviously have this particular equal breakdown of categories. So first of all, let's build up our clock, and then we'll go back to station rules in a short while. To build a clock, you basically use the tree on the left hand side to drag content into this center area to build your clock. So let's imagine the first thing we want in our clock is a link. Now I can either just drag a link like this and it won't have a category set, or if I prefer, if I get rid of this one, I could go into that category and grab a station ID link and drag it across there. And then you can see that it's automatically set the category to be station ID. I could go one step further and actually view the actual links inside that category, and I could drag that in there. So maybe I would, instead of that one, maybe I would put in the top of our promo, and that way I know exactly what link is going to play at the top of the hour. It's the top of our promo. Now let's add some songs and some other content. We could do the same thing with songs. We could drag either a song in, or we could drag a song from a particular category. We could even drag a specific song in, but we're unlikely to do that in most cases. You can carry on building your clock like this. So I may add another link in there, and then I may add a song, another song, and it's time to put a rock category song in. Then maybe time for an advert break. So I'm going to put an advert break in here. And as with everything else, I can choose which category this advert break should pick from. We could carry on adding stuff like that, but let's take a closer look at what we actually have in the content we have already. As we described earlier, both Schedule, Standard and Plus customers will get category and must-have tag columns. Schedule Plus customers also get type, gender, era, must not have columns. And everyone would get hardware end, droppable, fadeable, locked items, and chain type. So looking at this first link, we can see we've selected the category. We don't have any type, genders, eras, or tags available for links because we just haven't set any of those up. So let's take a look at the song next to it. The next item is a song, and you can see that in the category, rather than choosing a specific category, it's been left as use goals. Now when it's set to use goals, what that means is instead of it being a specific category, it will instead refer to the category goals as specified either in the station rules, or if you're overriding here in the overrides. So whenever you see a song or a link option which has, or indeed an advert option that has use goals or any advert, then that means that instead of the specific category you've listed, it will then refer back to the song category goals, whether they are derived from this clock or whether they're derived from the station rule set that is driving this clock. Next, you can choose the type if you are allowing types. As you can see, you can choose multiple items. You can allow more than one type. Similarly, for genders and eras, so you can drop them down, tick the genders you want, and tick the eras that you want. Now, often you won't do this unless you're trying to do something very specific with this clock. And it's okay to leave any, because part of the station rules allows you to define how many of these in a row you can have. So for example, you could leave your gender as any for the entire hour, but you could also then have the maximum male artist in a row set to 3, so that you would never hear more than 3 male artists in a row. The must-have tags column allows you to tick the tags. So let's say the first hour has to be a hour opener tag. So the first song in the hour is going to come from it's going to use the goals, but it must have hour opener tag. So any songs that are not tagged as hour openers will not be considered for this position. And you could also, if you're a Schedule Plus customer, you could also choose, and it mustn't be a love song. Hardware end, this allows you to have a hardware end, or this song will automatically end if a particular hardware event happens. And this is really usually only used for automated systems that are responding to like other external systems, such as, for example, our customers in the US would use this to be playing an item or to be playing something locally that needs to end when a hardware event comes from a satellite service that's providing an external feed of a syndicated show. The droppable column allows you to set whether this particular item could be dropped by the system if it needs to. So if you didn't want the system to ever drop this first song in the hour, then you would untick that, and the system wouldn't have the option to drop this if it's trying to run to time. Also, whether it is fadeable. So if you do not want items to be faded, you can choose that. And if you choose lock, then they will appear in the log with a padlock on them, and neither the system nor presenters will be able to move or edit them without unlocking them first. Finally, we've got the chain type. So because this is a live show, we may decide that the presenter is going to talk at the end of the first song. So you would change that to be a red square instead of a green circle. And then when Myriad Playout gets to the end of this song, the log will actually stop and wait for the presenter to press go again. Of course, they can override this in the log. It just means that you can add the structure to your clock that will set where the default talking positions are within the clock. Okay, so now we've got a few items. What we can do is we could highlight them all to copy, and we could then paste them in to get us closer to the end of the hour. Now, obviously, when you're building your own clock, you probably put a bit more effort into the actual structure. But for us, we're just trying to get our first clock built, and this has allowed us to do this quite rapidly. Of course, we don't want this to be we don't want the hour opener to play later. So what we can do is we could click on the item and say choose from the station ID category, and this one here I might choose here. I might change this one to just be automatically choose based on goals. So you can go into any of these and set items as well if you wish to. Okay, so now we've got the basics of our clock structure in place. Let's take a look at some of the other items we could add to the system. So let's close down links and songs. Advert breaks we've already looked at. Basically, you can say the category here. Now, this time you don't have to set. If you're using Myriad Schedule to schedule your adverts, you do not need to set this. If you're using an external advert scheduling system, a third-party system, then you will need to put in a reference time in here. So let's say you put this in at say 40 minutes past, and that will be the third-party advert scheduling system also needs to refer to this advert break as 40 minutes past, and that will allow the import process to match the advert breaks in a third-party system with the advert log items within the log. But as I said, if you use a Myriad Schedule for this, you do not need to worry about it. Okay, so let's look at what else we could add. We could add a news media item. So if I drag that in, you'll see it's news media item, and you just basically can specify the media item. So it's just basically a media item. A news media item is a standard media item that is has been set to be a news item. More useful, you can add in a basic media item. Now, a basic media item is any piece of media on your media wall. So if you've got a piece of media at number 15 that you want in there, you can just pop it in there and put it, and that will then become a hard item in there. Now, this is very often used for shows, for pre-recorded shows. Imagine you had somebody who was providing you with a show that was 59 minutes and 30 seconds long, and you wanted to build a clock that could do that. And let's say that the media item was going to be at media ID number 500. Your clock would be very simple. You'd have a link at the beginning, which would be a 30-second link or jingle, and then media ID 500. And that would be it. That's all you need for that clock. And then the system will always play the jingle followed by media item number 500. And you just replace the content in media item 500 each week with the new show. But back to this clock. Here we can see I've specified the exact jingle that I want to play in that position. But I've got 2 jingles back to back, which I don't really need. So normally you would just take one of those out. Actually, while I'm here, you can see that because this jingle has been classified as a sweeper on the media wall, i.e. has the little tick option for play as sweeper, we can see that the chain type has changed to a plus. And that means it will be swept into the intro of the following song. So when the log goes from this song here to this song here, this jingle will be embedded into the intro of this song, assuming that it can do so. We talked about auto hooks elsewhere. You could put one of these in, and when you click on the auto hook, you then would say what jingle to play at the beginning. So let's play jingle number 1 at the beginning. Let's play jingle number 2 as our separator, and jingle number 3 as our out. Play 3 items from this hour, and I want to do the next X items, and hit OK. So now that they'll play a jingle and then an auto hook, but that would also result in a jingle followed by another jingle. In this case, that would be okay because I happen to know that the jingle at media ID number 1 is a jingle that basically says coming up in the hour. So that's okay to play that after another jingle. You can place a hardware event into the log. So when you go into a hardware event, you set the hardware line, you change the hardware line, and you say whether to clear it, which means to turn it off, to set it, which is to turn it on, to flash it, which is to turn it on and off at a steady, slow pace, or a pulse, which is a one-time off, on, off. So you use that for some devices that require a pulse. Social media posts. These are text posts that will either be posted on Facebook, Twitter, or both. So you may put something in here that you want to be posted on your timeline in Facebook and posted on your Twitter feed. You can actually add tags into here as well. So you can add OCP tags into here. So you could actually get quite creative with this by adding in things like the name of the song that's coming next or things like that. But for now, we just leave it as hello, everyone. The next 3 items are fairly closely related. These are 3 time items available in clocks. That is absolute time, soft time, and reset time. Each one performs different tasks, so let's go through them in order. The first one is an absolute time, and this is a fixed or a hard time event, and it works differently depending on whether you are doing a live show, a live assist show, or an automated show. In both instances, basically Myriad Player will do something around the absolute time that you've set. So you can see I've just dragged this one in here and it's set to 27 minutes past the hour. Now, if this is a live show, then the system will effectively press go at 27 minutes past the hour. Now, in live shows, absolute times are usually used for waiting for a specific time. So let's say you wanted to create a clock that had played a jingle and then waited for 20 minutes while you took an external audio feed or of something and then carried on as normal. Then the clock would be a link item and then a absolute time set to 20 minutes and then the rest of the content for your clock. And it would have to also be in live assist mode. And that's because in absolute times work differently if it's an automation hour, if it's set to auto fade. So in auto fade mode, the absolute time performs a similar task in that it will press go at that exact time that you've specified in the absolute time. However, in an automated show, the system will automatically manage all the content before the ab time to ensure that the system hits the ab time at the specified time in the clock. So in this case, we've got the time set to 27 minutes, and if we were in auto fade mode, that means that anything before here, the system will either add or remove content, time stretch content, or even fade content in order to make sure that the absolute time happens at exactly 27 minutes past the hour. So in this particular case, in auto fade mode, if the sum total of all the content before item number 13 here, the absolute time, didn't amount to 27 minutes, then the system would then use the auto fade rules to determine how to make it reach 27 minutes. And that may be that it adds an extra song. It may be that it time stretches the content that's running before here to get there. Or it may have to compress it if it's longer than 27 minutes. It may drop a song, it may run the songs slightly time shrunk, or it may fade some items early. So the difference between live and live assistant auto fade is in auto fade, in both cases, Myriad will execute the ab time at the specified time. The difference is in live mode, it will either wait, so it will play whatever content is scheduled and then just wait for the time. Or, but in auto fade, it will actually manage all the content before the ab time in order to make sure that ab time is hit. So if you want the system to, if you want to use add times to add hard time events to automated shows, then the system will add or remove content to make sure it hits it on time. If, however, you want the system to sit there doing nothing for a period of time while something else happens, you would need to use a live assist show and an absolute time. Next up, we have soft times. Let's pop this one in here. Now, a soft time is very similar to an ab time, except for it's a little less harsh on the back timing when it's in auto fade mode. So in auto fade mode, an ab time will happen exactly at the time you've specified, and the system will time stretch and potentially fade or even drop content in order to meet that time or add content. With a soft time, what we're doing is we're setting a target time, and the system will will try its best to manage the content to get close to that time, normally to within one song duration. So if I go into the details for the soft time, you can see that we have a minimum time. We set the time, but then we also have allowed to be early by, and you can set a time in minutes and seconds and hundredths there as well. And so what that means is, in this particular item, we're setting a soft time for 37 minutes past, and the system is saying, okay, and if the content before this soft time would get us to within a minute and a half of 37 minutes past, then that's okay. If the content before the soft time doesn't get us to within a minute and a half, so say it takes us to 35 minutes past the hour, so we then be 2 minutes short, the system will then add another item, another song before the soft time in order to go beyond the 37 or to within the earliest arrival time anyway. And the system will then allow the song that song is added to continue playing, so that it will go beyond the soft time marker for up to the duration of the song or content that it had added. So basically, the system is going, with this ab time in here in auto fade mode, we're going to get to within 1 minute and 30 seconds of 37 minutes past, or we're going to overrun 37 minutes past by whatever is left on the item that's playing that happens to be playing at 37 minutes past. So it's if you want to just keep roughly to time, but you don't need your timed items to be exact, i.e. you're not taking some external event that happens at an exact time, then this provides a smoother way of for the listener, as songs are affected less by the auto fade rules. The final time we have is what we call a reset time. Now, a reset time is usually only used in talk shows. So let's imagine we have a talk show that we wish to, a clock for a talk show that we want to create. And what we want to do is we want to have two talking segments. So let's just quickly create a new clock. So I'll just hit OK, create a new clock. I'm going to call this one talk show, and it needs to be an advanced clock. We don't want to fill it with anything. So we might start with a link introducing the show. We may have an advert break, and then we may have a reset time marker that is set to hour. Now, the reason we would do this is, let me just remove this a second just to show you why we would do this. Let's say we were going to do a link and advert and then talk for 30 minutes, and then we're going to play another link and another advert, and then we're going to talk for another 30 minutes, and then we're going to finish up the show with a link. Now that's great, except for the system's currently showing a total duration of 3 minutes and 38 seconds. So if we were to look at this in the clock, it doesn't give any time references for the actual duration of the show, because it's not taking into account the 30 minutes or 28 minutes each hour, each half section, which is talking. But if we add a reset time marker in, so we put one here and set that one to be 30 minutes past, and then we do another one here, and we set that one to be 59 minutes and 40 seconds past, then this will mean that when this is in the when this appears in the log, the timing will be it'll be counting down. The back timing stuff will actually take into account this period here between the advert break and the reset time marker. So when you're actually running this in a live assisted show, then it would actually be quite a useful thing, because the reset time markers would give you that back timing as if there was content that was 30 minutes long between the advert break and the next link. So reset time markers are genuinely only used for live shows with talking elements. You can add scripts to your log, so you can type a script in here, and that will then be displayed in the log for the presenter. Split groups and split advert groups are only useful if you have Myriad Network, and they are used for playing split jingles in the case of split groups, or playing split advert breaks. Other than that, they work in a very similar way to everything else. So you can see, you say split car group, you say which split car group to actually use. We haven't got any set up on this system. And split advert break, same. You say which category and which and a reference if you use an external system. Okay, the final thing on this list is the clock, and this allows you to place one clock inside another clock, which sounds like something you would never do, except for when you consider that clocks don't have to be 1 hour long. An advanced clock can be as long as you want it to be. So if you consider a clock to just be a sequence of things, then you may create a clock which is your hour opening sequence, which consists of your hour opener jingle, your sponsor tag, your weather, and then the first advert break of the hour, and then you would have that as the first item, that clock as the first item in your clock, in other clocks. Now, the reason you might do that is if you did something like that, and then you put this sort of mini clock, which is only 4 items, in as the first item in all your other clocks. If your sponsor tag changes, all you need to do is change it in that 1 hour open sequence clock, and it will cascade into all the other clocks. So a clock in a clock, which is what this allows you to do, is actually quite a useful thing if you start to think of clocks as just sequences that you want to use. Other examples could be competitions or anything else. So you might be that you have a series of different audio items that are part of a competition, and you want to pop them in order, and you could create a mini clock for that and then use that inside your main clocks. So I'm just going to tidy this clock up because I put a lot of stuff in here we don't really need. So I'm just going to go through, highlight that one's okay to stay in. I'm just clicking on items and pressing the delete button to get rid of them so that we actually have something that looks vaguely okay. So let's say that we were going to do that. So we're going to finish this hour with an advert break, and we're going to start the hour with a link and an auto hook. So all looks good. Now, we haven't set any of this other stuff yet. So let's go through and use a few of them. We may say, okay, we want this one to be a ROG. We want this one to be an A-list song. And we could set the types if we wanted to. So we could set any of these. But as you can see, most of the items here are saying use goals. So currently, we would be using the song category weightings. So here we can see we're pretty much even split between A-list, pop, gold, dance, rock, R&B, jazz, and blues, and soul. And I know that we don't have any soul music. So if we were to leave this as it is, it wouldn't actually work as a schedule. We could override it, of course. That would work. But better for us to go and have a look at station rules in a second and fix the default station so that it's got a more representative balance of content. So that's it. We've created an advanced clock. There is far more detail on these in the Myriad Schedule manual as well. There's a manual that you can download, and there's more detail on the individual clock item types. But there we can see we've created our clock, and we are ready to go. So next thing we need to look at is how to assign those clocks to hours of the week. Now that we know how to create both simple and advanced clocks, you can create all the clocks you need for your station schedule and assign them to hours of the week using the clock assignment grid. To do that, you need to open Edit Clocks. So let's just do that from scratch. Under the Clocks and Rules section, you click on Edit Clocks. That opens up this window here, which gives you access to your clocks for adding new ones or editing, but also the clock assignment grid. As you can see, currently on the clock assignment grid, Monday from midnight through to 8 a.m. is set to be general clock. But we've just created the breakfast advanced clock, so let's add that in to the 6 a.m. hour on a Monday. And we may also want to add it to the 7 o'clock and maybe the 8 o'clock as well. And you could carry on doing that through Tuesday through to Sunday, or you can highlight several hours and then highlight the clock you want to assign and then click on the Set to Selected Clock button on the ribbon. That will then change those all into there. You can also edit the clocks directly by double clicking on them on here, and that will open up the clock editor as well. You can remove assignments by highlighting the hours you want to remove and click on the Remove Current Assignments. This will then leave it set to prompt, and then at scheduled time the system will ask you which clock you want to schedule in there. Sometimes you want empty clocks so that you can add content manually. In that scenario, you shouldn't leave it as prompt because the system will just not schedule anything in there. Instead, the best thing to do is to use a blank clock like this one here. In a blank clock, we have an advanced clock, but we have no clock items. So when a blank clock is used, all that will be added to the log in Myriad will be an hour start, and that's it. So you can then manually add more stuff in. So if we wanted to create a blank hour here, because we're going to say, for example, be taking an external show or a live gig or something like that, we can just add in the blank there. So that's how you do that. You'll also notice that they are orange and green. The difference between these are orange ones are live assist and green are automated. Okay, so once you're happy with that, you can you can use the more items, and you can export this clock assignment grid. And we'd recommend doing that as a backup. So you can click on export, save it as my assignments, and then you can get that. And also you can then load this back up. So if I was to delete everything off of here and then realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I can import clock assignment grid and bring it back in as well. So we'd recommend using this option to be able to load and save multiple clock assignment grids for different times of the year, or if your station schedule changes through the year. You also notice a couple of other options on the ribbon here. There's clear all, which as the name suggests will remove all of the clocks that are assigned here. And there's also a fill empty option. So let's say I've carefully put all of my content in except for Saturday, in which case I could fill empty and it will fill it with whichever of the clocks you've selected here. Yes, and it will just go off and do that. And that's pretty much all there is to clock assignments. Pretty straightforward. Next up, we'll have to look at how we would import some clocks from AutoTrack SE or AutoTrack 4. If you were coming from AutoTrack 4 or AutoTrack SE, then you would probably want to import your existing clocks and clock assignments into Myriad Schedule. You will also want to import your category names and styles, which would be converted to tags. The reason for that is that obviously if you're importing a bunch of content, then the categories need to match, because category 1 in AutoTrack will need to correspond to category 1 in Myriad Schedule if you want to reuse the clocks without having to change anything. Obviously in this case we already covered setting up the categories in Myriad Schedule, but I'll show you how you could have imported them from AutoTrack 4 if you wanted to, and also how to import those clocks. So let's get started. Go to the edit clock section in clocks and rules. And here you can see the clock assignment that we already had in place. But let's say that we didn't have any clock assignments done, and we wanted to instead import them from our AutoTrack system. Click on the Import tab, and here you've got two options: the Import Category Styles and Names, and Import Clocks and Assignments. So the first one you probably want to do is import the category styles and names if you haven't already ensured that the categories are in the same the numbers. However, if you've put a lot of content into Myriad Schedule and into Myriad Playout and categorized it using the categories inside of Myriad, and they don't match the ones in AutoTrack, at that stage it might be easier to change the clocks that you import rather than change all of the content on your system. However, if you want to import the category names and styles, click on the import category, select the database you want to, and click OK, and then the system will just walk you through the process. However, I'm not going to do that today because I know that my AutoTrack and my Myriad categories do not align, so I do not want to overwrite my Myriad categories with AutoTrack. Let's take a look at importing clocks and assignments. Click on the Import Clocks and Assignments. It'll ask you if you want to import them. Click on Yes, you wish to continue. You choose the AutoTrack database. If you've got multiple databases, make sure you click the correct one. Click on OK. It'll say you sure you want to import the clocks. You say yes. And you can see here all valid clocks and clock assignments have been successfully imported. We can see our clock assignment grid has been brought in and filled from AutoTrack 4, and any of the AutoTrack clocks have also been brought in. So Breakfast Live and should be Drive Live somewhere as well. Those are the two clocks that I brought in. There is Drive Live that were brought in from AutoTrack 4, and that's as simple as it is. If I double click on this, you can see that it's just brought in the content. There is all of the clock items in Myriad 5 in Myriad Schedule are compatible with the equivalent ones in AutoTrack. However, AutoTrack didn't have soft times, for example. So obviously you won't have any soft times brought in any clocks you import. There is a slight discrepancy on styles versus tags, because styles no longer exists, but tags is the direct replacement for styles. So when you do the import process, when you do an import category and style names, it just literally creates tags with the same names as all the styles in your AutoTrack 4 system. And that's all there is to importing category names, style names, and importing clocks and assignments from AutoTrack 4 or AutoTrack SE into Myriad 5 Schedule. And that's it for clocks and clock assignments in general. The next thing we need to look at is how to set up station rules, and also how to actually schedule content using Myriad Schedule. So we're going to finish this video here, and part 3 of the video will move on to station rules and scheduling, and we'll also cover reports and anything else that we've not covered so far. So thanks for watching this video, and make sure to check our website or YouTube to catch part 3 of this video course.